SAPO CEO Nomkhita Mona joins us. Great to have you. Thanks very, very much, Nomkhita, for your time.
Thank you for having us, Leanne. Good morning.
The biggest concern about SAPO is, as is most of the case in South Africa's public entities, is the finances. I mean, last year it was reported that SAPO asked for almost 5 billion rand from Treasury. Recently, the amount now is reported at 8 billion rand, and Treasury are not obliging SAPO's request. Let's get a comment from you on this.
Well, we still remain hopeful that the government is going to at least support SAPO's request, because remember, Leanne, that the SA Post Office does not exist in and of itself. We exist to serve the country, to be able to serve those of the country who have no other means of access to one, communication, but also in terms of postal services. So it's important for us to get this. And remembering the same thing, I mean, I'm new at the Post Office, having joined just over 6 months ago. But the value of having fresh eyes is that you are able to look at what is the problem. And I've also realized that part of the problem is that we have to service all these areas in rural areas, all as far afield as where the private sector would not wish to go. But we know that those post offices will never make money for the post office. So there is a universal service obligation that we have to fulfill as the post office, and somebody has to fund it, unfortunately. Where we can make profits, we do maximize on that, but we still remain hopeful that we would be able to motivate our case to government so that at least there could be some kind of assistance.
Yeah. I mean, SAPO is said to be on the verge of financial collapse, basically. That's in a nutshell what's happening. And one of the things you said when you took over, as that you identified, was the post office expenditure exceeds its revenue. So how are the controls under your watch now? What are things looking like?
Well, there's been a massive improvement in terms of that. If you looked at the expenditure year on year, we on Q2 had already saved, the difference was about 450 million. And we continue to look at that because at the C-suite level, meaning the CEO, COO, as well as the CFO, we are very much focusing a lot on the cash flow. We're focusing a lot on cost, reduction more than just, recovery. We need to ensure that where SAPO spends money is in places where it will have an impact back in the business. So we have really been quite tight in terms of managing that. The controls are in place, and we do see that there would be an improvement. However, we can't save ourselves out of the crisis that we are in. So we do need to get new revenue streams coming up, which we have identified, and we are already implementing some of those activities. But at the same time, because our issue is historical, we do require some kind of assistance to deal with the historical debt. I would like to just add, Leanne, that the problems of the SA Post Office are not problems of yesterday. When we looked at the books, we realized that the decline has started over 6 years ago. It has been gradual, only that it's become worse at this point. Fortunately, we are in a position to arrest it, especially if we get support from government.
The reality is that the Department of Communications Deputy Minister made a lot of reference to the Auditor General's findings about irregular, fruitless, wasteful expenditure, but said nobody to this point has been held accountable. And this is a major problem for everybody. It's a very bitter pill to swallow. Tell us, what is it about the kind of expenditure that has been, badly spent, and why has nobody actually been held accountable for this?
The discussion we were having in Parliament yesterday relates to the financial year 1920, because we were also late in terms of finalizing that. And since then, a lot has changed. We have been putting these measures in place to ensure that doesn't happen. That fruitless and wasteful expenditure amounted to 198 million. This is in the year 2019-2020 financial year. And what had happened is that there were investigations internally that were undertaken, because before the matter is deemed irregular or anything, there must be some process. So those processes were done, and people were identified those departmental unit heads who would have been responsible. However, what was also found was that there was no fraud, there was no wrongdoing. The only transgression that they had made was to not follow their own procedures. I'll give you an example. Part of those areas of fruitless and wasteful, when we pay SRP grants in all these far-flung areas, and then they did not order the tents and the chairs and the toilets for the people, and then it rains and they have to do something, in an emergency. Those are the things that then become irregular in terms of the process, but in terms of the money, how it was used and what it was used for. It was not found that the post office had lost money. But the important thing is that the PFMA, as well as Treasury regulations, do require us to hold people accountable.
Yeah, which is very important, and it's tough to give money when nobody's been accounted. I mean, the South African Post Office has not been a profitable entity since I think the last time was in 2006, when it posted a profit of about 276 million rand. Since then, nothing, absolutely nothing. It's just been a very, very, very draining entity on the state. And we've seen from the finance minister, he gave the medium-term budget last week saying that he's not giving handouts anymore. This is not going to happen. And this, of course, is aimed directly at institutions such as the Post Office. But let's quickly talk about the 2021 annual report. This has not been tabled as yet. It was due in September. You've asked for an extension on this. Why is this? Is this again due to money, the fact that you don't have money to even submit the report? Because I suppose it's difficult if we don't see the financials to see just how badly the Post Office is actually doing. February is the new deadline. Perhaps you want to talk a little bit about this.
Sure. We did submit on time on the 31st of May 2021, which is the statutory date that we're supposed to submit. So we pushed as hard as we could. We made sure that we submitted everything. However, the AG, because there were some residue of issues that they were going to start auditing from the previous financial year, and then they felt on themselves that they would need to extend the date and not be able to finish when they were supposed to. That is the one area. But equally, we went back to them to say we would like to request an extension, which we wrote to the minister as well, because we wanted to deal with the major issue of a going concern status of the Post Office. And that basically is the reason, and that is the process that is now underway. And we would be able to then, they've done most of the work in terms of the AG. I think they would be able to conclude the audit as soon as we finalize the going concern status.
I mean, there's just so many issues plaguing the Post Office, and it really is. I mean, one would ask the question, besides rural areas that desperately need to have the likes of a post office. But again, when you talk to Post Office, I mean, the technology is down, the staffing, the leadership, all of this. I mean, obviously you've come in, as you say, you've only been there for 6 months. There's, there really is a big need for a turnaround at the Post Office. But many asking the question, what's the point of having a post office? I mean, who even uses it besides in the certain areas, and can they not be turned into something else and somebody else carry the duty of the Post Office? Why is it essential that we keep a post office?
You'd be very surprised, Leanne, as to the role played by post offices throughout this country. It's easier for you and I, who are more privileged, because we can get to the alternative service providers, but the bulk or the majority of South Africans still rely on the Post Office. We actually also did do a study that also was asking the same question, and we realized that actually there's a huge role. So remember, our role is not only just to distribute post. We play a big role in the socio-economic status of the majority of South Africans. If you take the Post Office out of the equation, you would be surprised that it would be a problem. If I give you the private sector companies that are in the distribution and courier space, they themselves don't want to go to those areas that are far-flung. They'd rather go and cherry pick in the areas that it's easier to do business in. So the South Africans would suffer if the post office is not there. But also, I think we should not look at the post office with the eyes of the old post office, because in our eyes, we believe that the old post office is dead or should die. And the new post office of tomorrow, which is a strategy that we have now submitted to the board, to the ministry, and now we are busy implementing that strategy. It talks to what the post office of tomorrow is supposed to be doing. We are now going to be focusing a lot more on logistics and warehousing, modernizing and digitizing the post office. We even want to go cashless so that we don't have all these queues that are snaking out of our buildings. And we are really excited about the prospects of the new post office. And we believe that if we can get some kind of assistance, which we are not sitting down and waiting for, we have identified a lot of these other new revenue generating activities, and we're quite excited about our future, but the current state is a bit dire.
Amazing. I'm getting so many responses coming in on social media. Somebody saying, Roger writing in and saying, when your mail is stolen, nobody wants to use your service. And we can, I suppose, understand that. The trust in the South African Post Office.
He's absolutely correct. We did have an issue about theft. I suppose we still do have it. However, what we've done is that we are in the process of implementing or installing CCTV cameras in all the major sorting centers. And we are constantly investigating. We had a case where somebody was taken by the police because she was caught red-handed with parcels that don't belong to her. So there has been that, and it's something we've been dealing with, quite decisively within the post office. People have been dismissed, and etc. And we do need to build this trust with the South Africans, and we do understand when they do not wish to do it. But we have begun to see a lot of input and a lot of comments from people who have seen the other side of the new post office, because we are indeed obsessed with the customer.
Another comment coming from Joseph, which I think you may have addressed, and I asked you that question, I mean, the role of a post office in this day and age. And Joseph saying in this era, the post office will become obsolete. No one writes letters, no one buys stamps, because we use email, WhatsApp and overnight couriers. However, you have explained, I mean, there's many other reasons that the post office is used. And then another angle coming through from another viewer, and this is Heidi van Rooyen writing in and saying, closing post offices across the country is ridiculous. And Mamzam Toti, only 2 post offices still operational out of 4 originally. It is a huge mess, especially when you look at the queues for the SASA grant payments. So it looks like these are the big things that post offices really are assisting with. And more than that, I don't know, question marks, but the SASA payments and the queues and the inefficiency there.
Well, I think the writer was right about nobody writes letters anymore. So our mail revenue has gone down over 50% over the last year and a bit. So that is the trend that we're watching. It continues to go down. But what is going up is exactly what he says about the courier services. So the SA Post Office courier service is really, beginning to pick up. We have signed up 4 international clients. We have been working with them over the last 6 or 7 months now, and that side of things is moving. And that's why this new post office of tomorrow is no longer a postal service traditionally, necessarily. We are focusing on that. The queues at SASA, the SASA grant queues at the post offices is something that we have been dealing with gradually. We have introduced separate queues for people who want to come and do motor vehicle licensing, any other service that the post office offers, and then also those that are doing the SRD grants as well as the normal SASA grants. But what we've done in the last couple of months or month or so is that we have introduced the virtual system where they can go and get paid or take or get their payment from merchants that we've partnered with the Post Bank. At this point, it's still Pick n Pay and Boxer, but we find that people are resistant to some of those. They still want to come to the post office. And therefore, we need to make a way that we do not want to have queues around there. We have other big plans that talk to how a post office can enable the economy of the region by making sure that even the spaza shops in the regions are enabled, maybe with a POS machine, such that people don't have to go and get cash and then go buy. They can go and transact directly. So those are the ideas that we have going forward.
Yeah.
And we're quite excited that we'll be able to reduce the queues.
You're excited, but what about the staff? Because that's another issue. When you walk into the post office, I have never seen more miserable staff, ever. Seriously, CEO, it's sad. It's actually very, very sad. I mean, the staff morale within the post office is something that desperately needs to be attended to. And it's something that we keep asking the different CEOs to look into and to try and, because it just, I can imagine the atmosphere of working for a state entity where you just never know. You never know what's going on. I mean, we're talking about a staff complement of around about, it was confirmed at 16,000, yet unions have previously made allegations about ghost workers, which could mean more fraudulent expenditure if it's actually true. Your staff, can you very quickly address that issue? I know we've already jumped into 7 o'clock, but it is something that I think needs to be spoken about.
Yes, it is a sad state of affairs because post office employees are people who've given their lives to work for the post office. And there's a number of reasons why people are sad. You know, we get robbed every day because people are looking after this, are looking for this SASSA money. And our area managers, branch managers, they get fetched from home or at night and they get told to go and open up, etc. And there's a lot of trauma in the system, especially at the retail side of things. But what we've started doing now is to communicate with the staff at all levels. This is now even including the new strategy that we have just finalized. We are taking it down and we're unpacking it to the employees so that they know what's going on. We don't want them to hear from radio or TV what is going on. But yes, morale is a big issue and we know why. It has been going really badly for a long time, but we are dealing with such issues.
No, I hope so. I really do. I mean, another one, and finally I wrap this up because I'm seeing just loads of messages coming through. The post office in a time of COVID where even before COVID, I mean, I remember making an order before COVID. It was an international delivery, couldn't do it through a courier company, but did it through the South African Post Office. It must have taken in excess of maybe over a year for me to get something. And when somebody posts something for your birthday, you kind of want to get it that year and not 2 years later. And this is a real issue. If we cannot deliver parcels on time, how can we honestly trust the South African Post Office?
That's one of the things we dealt with when I walked in. We physically went into some of the sorting centers and we made sure that we wanted to go back to basics because you might have high-flying strategies and everything, but if you don't do the basics right, then you won't be able to do that. When I joined, there were multiple millions of parcels and letters on the floors of the JIMC, which is the major sorting center in Johannesburg. As I speak to you, I'm told that for the first time, there is no backlog, in terms of those. So we're pushing as hard as we can. People are dealing with the mail that does come in. Those issues were there in the end. We're not going to say they didn't happen. Some of it was pilferage. Some of it was downright, inefficiencies. Now we have dealt with those. People are beginning to get their parcels and we continue to hold people accountable.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Thanks, SAPO CEO Nomkhita. Thanks so much for talking to us here on the program and many issues around the South African Post Office. Sorry we ran a little bit late of that interview. Let me quickly get the news at 7 to you now.